Hello, Tennessee Voices viewers and listeners. This is David Plazas, the Opinion and Engagement Director for the USA Today Network Tennessee and the Tennessean. Today, we have a treat of having three guests from the Nashville Teacher Residency. We have Holly Tilden, who's the Executive Director. We have Lindsay Hamilton, who's the Director of Projects and Equity. And we have the Matt Cheek, who's the Director of Development and Strategic Partnerships. So thank you so much, all of you, for joining me today. And Holly, if you would start telling us a little bit about what is the Nashville Teacher Residency and what do you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Nashville Teacher Residency is a one-year state-approved teacher training program with the mission to develop and license educators from diverse backgrounds and experiences who honor the dignity of every student. Now, that's a mouthful, and what it really means is that we work incredibly hard to train brand new teachers for local schools that are aware of and celebrating the students in their classrooms, and that they can do that with excellence while also advancing either science, math, or English instruction. We've been in Nashville since 2016, and we are a homegrown program that is about to start our 7th cohort here this summer. And we currently train teachers in Metro Nashville Public Schools. Over these last few years, we've had the privilege to grow a little bit bigger and now have a larger leadership team, which includes Matt and Lindsay, and allows us to serve more candidates across more schools in Metro Nashville.
Thank you. Well, Lindsay, tell me about yourself and how you found yourself in the NTR.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I found myself here after being a math teacher who was trained in an alternative certification program. I completed Teach for America in rural North Carolina, and then I moved to Nashville, taught here for a while, and then found this organization and have been really passionate about the training work that we've done since. And if you called on Lindsay, I'm sorry if I just interrupted and cut her off.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Holly, it's great to hear from you. Lindsay, tell me how you.
Yeah, I joined NTR in June of 2019. Prior to that, I also am an alternate route certification. So I did not have the 4-year teacher prep experience, but instead had a year like embedded in a classroom, kind of similar to the Teach for America model, but my program was an organization at the time called Nashville Teaching Fellows. And so similarly had like the experience of not having that 4-year program behind me and having to sort of learn all the things that it takes to be a teacher in that training condensed 1-year program. So I think that Holly and I both like share that passion, Matt as well, in like, okay, we've done this in a year or in a short time, and we know how challenging it is, and we also know can look back on our experiences and go, oh man, if I'd only had this, or if someone only had told me this, or if I had this experience. And I think that in terms of personal lived experiences, informs a lot of the decisions we make with programming. But I taught in Nashville public schools, middle schools, English language arts. When you're a middle school teacher, sometimes I also taught social studies, which is normal, but I also taught science 1 year, which is Matt, a history teacher over there, getting excited for social studies. Also taught science 1 year, which usually doesn't pair with English, but when you are a middle school teacher, you are just ready to just jump in wherever you're needed. And so ELA was definitely, English language arts was definitely my passion. And I, started at NTR really supporting English language arts residents. And as I think we grew as an organization and started to really look at what our priorities were, we began to center equity more. So in the winter of 2019, or fall winter, started doing a lot of that equity work, that internal looking work of who do we serve and how do we mitigate harm that we know is going to fall upon them, and how do we create an experience that is like radically inclusive of all types of people, and that really like honors them and meets their needs, and like looks into the learning styles of the people that are coming to us who are career changers. Like, we're not, our demographic isn't the normal like 22-year-old straight out of college. So we've got people spanning like years of expertise and careers and all these different types of experiences, and different educational backgrounds too. So really looking at like, how do we embrace an equity lens to do that work?
Thank you very much. And so Matt, I understand you're a history teacher?
Yes, I was. I'm a former sixth grade social studies teacher. I got my start. So I am in this very weird category. So I went through a traditional ed program in South Carolina. I went to Clemson, go Tigers. Shameless plug there. Then I did Teach for America and taught in South Carolina, taught social studies, then moved to Knoxville, was an instructional coach there, and then made my way to NTR. And so I've worn a variety of different hats in my short career, but I really love the work that we get to do here in Nashville.
So I'd love to learn more about this passion toward education. You've spoken about it a little bit, but in your experience, in terms of working with the teachers that you do, what brings them to the profession and what can you do to keep them in the profession? I'll just open this up to all of you.
Yeah, that's the $1 million question right now, is like how, like, I think if we turned on the news tonight, right, we would see a story, at least one story on this teacher shortage that's happening. And then like figuring out, not only do we not have enough teachers who are entering the profession, but then how do we keep them there? And I think our program is a unique one. It's really incredible. I think about today, even as I was talking to a prospective applicant, and their story is very similar to even some of our residents now. They went through a traditional program, and then something happened along the way where they weren't able to finish their education degree. And so they finished with an interdisciplinary studies or a general studies degree, non-licensure. And so it's like, well, what do I do with that? And so, you can't go and teach in the school district if you're not licensed. And so for a lot of them, they made their way into like after school programs, boys and girls clubs, daycare centers. And so like we're just a unique kind of pathway that allows people from those backgrounds whose journey wasn't just this, kind of straight line into the profession to enter the teaching profession and be really great at it. And we also do a lot of our recruiting from folks who are educational assistants, paraprofessionals, existing employees within MMPS. We found that to be a really great place to find passionate individuals because they're committed to the district, they're committed to their schools, committed to the community, all of those things. And, because of one thing or another, they just hadn't been able to complete their licensure. And so we're the program that allows them to do that.
I've been watching on TV Abbott Elementary. I don't know if any of you have seen that show, but it's a fun. Really enjoyed it, and my parents are educators. I've never been a teacher, but when you see the representation of teachers, what more would you like to see of them? Because in some sense, there's a complicated view of teachers, but generally positive, I think.
Lindsay, you want to take this one?
So I actually recently came across a study that talked about how teachers are viewed more negatively now than they were like prior to the pandemic. And that's exacerbating a lot of, I think, the teacher morale, that the decline in teacher morale that we're seeing. I think we're living, we're sick of hearing that we're living in unprecedented times, but we really are. I have a first grader and, his entire school experience has been in COVID. His second grade peers, their entire school experience has been affected by COVID, and our teachers are still dealing with that on a daily basis, in addition to everything else on their plates. So when I think about how teachers are portrayed, and what I wish were different, right? Like, I wish people understood the work that it takes to show up for, sometimes 120 kids every single day, to build individual relationships with those students across cultural differences, sometimes across language differences, the commitment it takes to ensure that every child walks into your classroom and is seen and is heard and is valued, and how hard teachers have to work to really understand their students and the unique gifts that they bring and how their brilliance shows up. We think about teachers as, they just stand in front of the classroom and deliver a lesson, but it's, hours of preparation, of becoming experts in their content, and then of engaging their students in those relationship building activities, and conducting outreach to families so that you can form those partnerships. So it's not me in here teaching this and it doesn't align with what's happening at home. It's me allowing students and families to bring what's at home into the classroom so that we're building like a real community. And then all the things that happen after the lesson is over, right? We think about, oh, well, they grade papers. And like, that makes me laugh because I'm like, yeah, that's not actually what we're doing. Like, we're analyzing what our students are thinking. Like, you're literally looking at 30 pages and going like, what are these kids thinking? And what do I need them to be thinking? And that kind of nuanced, complex, like work, I don't think people think about that when they think about teaching. I don't think people recognize like the cognitive lift that is teaching. Something I do hear a lot that I agree with, or that I maybe celebrate. I don't celebrate the conditions, but I celebrate that it's recognized that, you know, I do hear people recognize, oh, a teacher can't just be a teacher. You know, a teacher has to be a teacher, a social worker, a counselor, you know, sometimes a friend, sometimes the auntie, you know. I had a lot of kids who called me mama. They were like, yeah, you're the school mama, because they knew they were going to get in trouble if they were bad. And then they also knew that, you know, I had their back. And so I think, you know, you're the nurse, you're the first aid person. Sometimes you're the, I don't know what the official word is for person breaking up a fight, but sometimes you're whatever that official word is. You know, you're a referee at recess, you're a lot, you wear so many hats. And so I do sometimes see that portrayal, and even in Abbott Elementary, we're all watching that show as well. You know, you do see aspects of that being reflected. I will say they spend way more time in the copy room, in the break room, and in the halls, just leaving their kids running around to chat in Abbott Elementary than I think any educator has ever done ever. But, you know, it wouldn't make good prime time to just show us doing standards-based teaching.
Well, thank you so much for that. Before we continue, I always like to ask guests, you know, midway through the conversation, a little bit about how they're helping their own wellness and self-care. And we talk a lot about that. The teachers, not just teachers, but also leaders, often put a lot on their shoulders and don't take the time to rest or take the time to really do something else to help their minds. Could you tell me a little bit about any particular hobby or streaming list or watch, you know, things that you're watching or doing or reading to help your own wellness and healthcare? And why don't we start with Holly, then go to Matt, then go to Lindsay.
I love Tennessee state parks and the fact that we have protected green space in our city and in our state. And so in these last, almost 24 months since March is about to start, our family has really made an effort to spend more time outdoors and in green spaces. And then I think from a work standpoint, we've been working really hard to try and model for our residents or our teacher candidates what it looks like to care for yourself. Because it's one thing to say, teachers, take care of yourselves. And then it's another to not show them what that looks like. And so we've been working really hard to model that in some capacity of like actually having times when we shut off and helping our teachers do that too.
Thank you. How about you, Matt?
Yeah, I have this conversation a lot with friends and like family about, you know, this idea of burnout. And this year for Christmas, I got this book, Work Won't Love You Back, by Sarah Jaffe. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, but I love the way that it just like has like refocused me on like, you know, work is one part of me, but it is not the entirety of me. And like, you know, I'm going to work really hard because I love what I do. But at the same time, like I want to be able to set boundaries. And that's one of the things I love about NTR is that like we're a team that's like united and we run after things, but we also like want to protect our time and protect each other and set up systems where like we can rest, because like when we're, you know, taking care of ourselves and being in our best selves, then like we can show up to work in different ways. And also giving ourselves grace is like, it's okay to take rest, right? It's okay. Like we're not resting to become more productive or anything like that. We're resting because that's what our body needs. And like, I think that has been a learning process for me at NTR. Like I was the teacher who showed up like right there when the door was being unlocked, I was going to stay late. I was coaching sports. I was, leading clubs. And like, I think about the teaching profession as a whole is like, that's what we're told is like a good teacher. And so that's why we see teachers run into the ground. Like for me, I ended up in the hospital and because I wasn't taking care of myself. And so like, I think it's really important that like what Holly said of us modeling that for our residents, because the only way that we can make the teaching career a sustainable one is when we do that. And to kind of circle back to a question that you were asking before about this retention piece is that that's the conversation I think we need to like, elevate on the state level. Is like everybody wants to talk about pipelines into the teaching profession, but it doesn't matter if we're putting hundreds, thousands of bodies into the classroom if they're not going to stay. And so we really need to talk about the environment and the ecosystem that teachers are walking into, specifically teachers of color, when, we see them leaving in droves. And that comes from, what I was just sharing about my own experience. We're the coaches, and what Lindsay was saying, it's like we're wearing all these different hats. And so if we're not careful about reimagining these innovative systems and school places that honor not only students, but also the teachers in the building, then we're going to see this problem continue for the years to come. And so I think like that motto of work won't love you back. If something happens to me, they're going to hire somebody else. And that's like kind of changed my thinking about the way that I care for myself.
Oh, thank you so much, Matt, for sharing that. Very important. Lindsay, how about you?
So this is the wrong question for me because wellness and healing are like my passion. That's all I talk about outside of work. It's like my only hobby right now. And I think I share experience with a lot of people of color and a lot of people who experienced this pandemic as a real reckoning with what it meant to exist and what it meant to live in this country. What it meant to do more than just survive and just get by. And so I think I really realized that, like Matt said, I found my value in work, especially as a teacher. The stakes are high. So I think in the last 2 years have really realized how much I was, and I think this is like endemic of education, like conditioned to work myself to death. If you lose sleep, if you get sick, you still go to school. Now people don't go to school sick, but that you don't take sick days when you're a teacher. So the last 2 years have been a real reshaping for me around, what does my life need to look like so that I can engage in my own healing, so that I can decolonize what's been colonized within my own body, within my own mind, within my own spirit. And for me, like I think my colleagues have mentioned, it's so important for us to take that work to our residents, to build that into even to build it into our coursework, which is that's not like a common, a practice, but to build into our coursework, what does healing look like? We serve a majority of residents of color who identify, right now our cohort, most of our residents of color identify as Black or African American. And so what does it look like for our Black and African American candidates to engage in both learning how to teach and also learning how to heal their racial trauma, because we know that so much of that racial trauma happens within the walls of a school building. And so when we're putting you back in a school building and we're putting you in a position of power, but also you're not in a position of power because you have all these people who, are supervising you, managing you, that can trigger so much pain and hurt. And so how do we train you to be a teacher, prepare you for that, prepare you to be, culturally competent for your students, and then also prepare you to love yourself enough that you protect your spirit, you protect your peace, you protect your heart whenever you're engaged in this work. So since Matt dropped a book recommendation, I will drop my book recommendation, My Grandmother's Hands. And I don't want to try to pronounce the name because I know I mispronounce it, Resmaa Menakem, My Grandmother's Hands. If you look that up, you'll be able to find it. And that really has been transformational reading for me, as I'm engaging in that, just around what, rethinking what healing looks like. I think that it's not just in terms of how we approach the work. It's not just an intellectual calling. It's a physical response that we feel, that we have to be able to understand, so that we can move forward in that process.
Well, thank you so much. This has been so insightful. And to the Tennessee Voices audience, again, this is Holly Tilden, Lindsay Hamilton, and Matt Cheek from Nashville Teacher Residency. I'll give Holly the last word in terms of people want to learn more about NTR. Where can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you can head on over to our website, www.nashvilleteacherresidency.org, and read about our organization, some of our initiatives. Or if you're interested in becoming a teacher, you can also apply for our 2022-2023 cohort. You can also follow us on either Twitter or Instagram at Nash Teacher Res. And we would love to hear from you. We would love to share more of our story if you want individual stories about what we do. But we are at heart a relational organization. We believe relationships are key to high quality instruction, and would love to get to know more folks in Nashville and the surrounding area.
I want to thank you all for your time today. May you stay well and healthy. And again, I'm grateful for sharing your wisdom and your thoughts today.
Thanks for having us today.
Thank you so much, David.